is exactly the style I like, minimal and lightweight. It's good enough that I don't feel like I need to go out and buy another one. I can just slide it into my sling bag and take it with me out to lunch.
I don't know if you guys are going to be able to tell or not, but one of the first things I did when I got this was put on a screen protector.
The first screen protector I tried was made for the original Legion Go. But even though both devices have 8.8-inch displays, the Legion Go 2 display is just a little bit different, so a screen protector for the original Legion Go wouldn't work. So I used the official one from Lenovo instead. It's an HD clear protector, and once it was on, it was barely noticeable, but I felt better knowing the screen had a little protection. And I'll talk about the screen more a little bit later in the video, because this OLED panel is something else. Upgrading the internal SSD wasn't difficult. There are more steps than the original, but I did find something that really surprised me. Before I take it apart, I like to go into the BIOS and disable the built-in battery. That way, if I accidentally press the power button, it won't turn on while I'm opening it. Having detachable controllers makes working on the Legion Go easier for me than other handhelds. I can lay it flat, screen down, without worrying about the sticks or triggers pressing against the table. There were 6 screws along the back plate I had to take out, and then there were 2 more hiding underneath the kickstand. After I removed all the screws, I used a couple of different pry tools to take off the back cover. This longer one with its sharper edge was good for getting it started, and this guitar pick worked well for the rest of it. The SSD sits under a small plate connected to the fan, so in order to change the SSD, I had to disconnect the battery, remove the battery, then remove the fan. First, I used a plastic pick to slowly work out the battery connector. I was really trying not to pull on the wires. There were 2 screws on either side of the fan. Both worked to hold the battery in place. Once I removed them, I was able to lift the battery out. I disconnected the fan cable, then there was 1 screw holding it in place. After removing the fan, I was finally able to see the SSD. And here's the surprising part. It came with a smaller M.2 2242 drive. At the price I paid, I really thought it would have the larger 2280, much like the Xbox Ally X. Now, in the end, it really didn't matter because I was going to install this crucial 4TB SSD either way. Still surprising though. So I plugged it in and then replaced the screw. Then it was a matter of putting everything back together. The fan first. On the left side, there's a small notch that lines it up. I then reinstalled the mounting screw and attached the cable. I set the battery back in place, then replaced the 2 screws that secured it, and then finally I plugged the connector back in. Then I put the back plate back on, the 6 screws across the rear, and then the 2 screws underneath the kickstand. I used Lenovo's USB Recovery Creator tool to reinstall Windows, and it was during the Windows install that I noticed 2 improvements that I was really happy to see. I went to the support page, to drivers and software, and selected Get Recovery Media, and entered my serial number. After choosing my Windows language, it had me sign into my Lenovo account and fill out a few details, like you would if you were ordering a product. Once that was done, it let me download the Recovery Creator tool. From there I had to sign in again, select my operating system, and wait while it downloaded the recovery files and created the USB. Once it finished, I plugged the USB into a dock, powered on the device, and Lenovo's recovery software handled pretty much everything else. The only thing it asked me to do was remove the USB at one point. Now the whole recovery process still takes a really long time, so if you don't want to wait, or you don't care about doing a clean install, you could use cloning software like Macri and Reflect instead. The setup process included the usual Windows install, and here's that first improvement I was happy about. Lenovo added a fingerprint sensor to the power button. It definitely makes day-to-day use easier. Not having to type a PIN every time I power it on, it's just better. And the second improvement I was happy about was the native landscape display. On the original Legion Go, the screen was native portrait, which meant parts of the setup felt like the whole device was sideways, and sometimes I had to go into Windows settings just to fix the orientation. With the Go 2, everything starts and stays in landscape mode. It just feels more natural this way. Now, there's one last step for this install, because ever since I installed Xbox Full Screen on my original Legion Go, I just can't go back to regular Windows. So I went into Settings, Windows Update, and joined the Windows Insider program. And then I went online and downloaded Vive Tool.
Okay, real quick. While I was making this video, Microsoft announced that Xbox Full Screen was coming to all handheld devices, so you may not need Vive Tool anymore. But I left that part in the video because it was part of my overall experience with this device.
I went into the command prompt and entered the following in this order. After that, I opened the registry editor and used the following path to navigate to the OEM folder. Inside the OEM folder, I went into Device Form. Under Value Data, I entered 2E and selected hexadecimal as the base. I restarted the system, I went to the settings and into gaming, and Xbox full screen was now available. Once everything was set up, I finally got to try out the new hardware, and the first thing I want to talk about is that new OLED screen. Now, I'm not a display expert or anything like that, but even I could see the difference right away, no matter what game I played, whether it was Call of Duty Black Ops, Marvel Rivals, Doom Dark Ages, or Battlefield 6, everything just looked better. The contrast and vibrancy just made everything look sharper and more colorful. And for me, that new OLED screen really drove home just how much of an upgrade this new model is. On the original Legion Go, the speakers always sounded a little thin and high-pitched. Not terrible, but definitely not something I enjoyed listening to. On the new model, the sound is fuller, it has more body, and the highs aren't as sharp. Even though both devices still have the same 2-watt speaker setup on paper, I definitely enjoyed the sound coming out of the new Legion Go more.
Power in hell's hands. None of us would survive. That much power in hell's hands. None of us would survive.
Lenovo ditched the square boxy shape of the original grips and switched to a more rounded design. The old grips weren't terrible, I eventually got used to them, but these new rounded corners are just more comfortable to hold. They sit better in the hand, and the new controllers fit the older Legion Go. Not perfectly, but good enough that I went out and bought another pair. Although, funny thing, even though I ordered the left and right controllers at the same time, I only received the right one. I mean, you gotta be kidding. I really don't use first-person shooter mode that often, but when I did, I really hated the idea of resting my hand on that exposed connection point. Lenovo added a little cover that snaps over the rail when you detach the right controller. They also added a detent and little locking switch to the controller base, so when you pick it up, the base stays attached. These are small things, but they do improve the experience when playing in FPS mode. Well done, Lenovo. The buttons and triggers feel fine. They all had an adequate amount of clickiness, and there wasn't much change here. But they did add a couple of new buttons, and they both add some important functions. With the top button, I was able to go into Legion Space and assign a function that allows it to bring up the Xbox settings. As for the bottom button, when I installed Xbox Full Screen, I was able to swipe up from the bottom of the screen, and this allows me to switch between opened apps. But this bottom button actually does the same thing using Lenovo's Legion Space software. Although, I think I prefer the looks of the Xbox one. They rounded the D-pad this time instead of using that old cross shape. It's my favorite D-pad design because it's the most comfortable for me to use. The joysticks still don't have quite the tension I prefer for first-person shooters, but I can live with them. In terms of battery life, the newer model comes with a 74 watt-hour battery, a big improvement over the original's 49.2 watt-hour. I played Black Ops 7 for 30 minutes. I used performance mode with a resolution of 800p and 60Hz. I did all of my gaming in multiplayer, and when my timer went off after 30 minutes, I had 73% battery left, with an estimated remaining time of about 1 hour and 53 minutes. On the original, running the same test left me at about 70% left after 30 minutes, with about an hour and 9 minutes left. Lenovo included a 65 watt-hour charger with the device. Starting with my battery at 1%, I charged it for 30 minutes, and at the end, my battery had reached 40%. The changes to the hardware did make the Legion 2 heavier. On my scale, it came in at a pretty hefty 952 grams, while the older model weighed in at 887, and you can definitely feel the difference. But honestly, I'm never actually playing with my hands held out in front of me. They're always usually resting on something, a table, my lap, an armrest, so the weight doesn't really bother me that much. The Legion Go 2 comes with the new Z2 Extreme processor and 32GB of RAM, while the Legion Go 1 comes with the Z1 Extreme and only 16GB. I used the built-in benchmark tools in Marvel Rivals, Doom Dark Ages, and Cyberpunk to see what kind of frame rates I get from both devices. It's not a scientific test, but I was curious how big the difference would be. To try and keep things fair, I went into the BIOS for both devices and set the VRAM to 6GB. I tested both devices in balanced and performance mode at 800p and at 60Hz. For Marvel Rivals, graphics settings were set to low, and I used AMD FSR3 in performance mode. Doom was also set to low settings with FSR on, and I used its handheld preset. And finally for Cyberpunk, I just used their Steam Deck preset. In Marvel Rivals, the results were a lot closer than I expected. In both balanced and performance modes, the two devices stayed within about 10 frames of each other. In Doom the Dark Ages, I saw the kind of gap that I was suspecting for all the games. The Legion Go 2 pulls ahead more clearly there, especially in performance mode. But Cyberpunk 2077 brings that difference back down again. In both modes, the original Legion Go was once again within roughly 10 frames of the Go 2. It was in 3D Mark's Time Spy and Firestrike where the gap finally looked like what I expected. The Legion Go 2 pulls noticeably ahead here, with much stronger scores in both balanced and performance presets. Despite